Sometimes for your output you want to have columns of data, and so in this case we have a text box here, and each line of the text box produces columns that are lined up either on the left or on the right. There are two ways we can do this. One is to use string padding, the other one is to use the String.Format method, and we'll look at both ways. The idea here is I add an item to the list, it gets put into the list in the appropriate columns. Let's take a look at the project. So I have a text box that I named txt_list, and here's the trick to get columns. Your font has to be a monospaced font, and by that I mean every character takes up the same amount of space. So an I takes up the same width as an uppercase W. The one font that's really popular for doing this, that's on every machine basically, is Courier New. So I set the font for the text box to Courier New, and I also set up the multiline property to be true, which allows you to have more than one line. Then I have a text box named txt_product, one named txt_quantity, one named txt_price, and then a button named BT and add. I also double-clicked on the form and wrote some code so that when I run this, it begins with some data already in the text box. And I just did that for demonstration purposes to speed things up. But I also want to show you how to add things in on a form load. So I'm going to double-click on the form and we'll look at the code. When I double-clicked on the form, it created a method for form1, the name of my forward, _load, and it's operating on a loading the form, which occurs after the initialization components. And I just simply wrote some code here that executes every time we start up the project. And so I have some text going into txt_list.text, in which I'm creating the headers for the first two lines, the column headings and then the underscores. We'll look at these a little bit in more depth. Then I'm creating some variables of product, quantity, price, and item total, and then I'm adding those to the list. And in doing so, I'm using something called PadRight and PadLeft, and we'll look at that in a minute, what that actually does. And then I do the same thing for the second product. So I have a product of Tide detergent and one of Honeycrisp apple. So I'm going to switch over to Excel to demonstrate what's happening here. So here would be my text box in green. And as I said, I wanted to set this up in columns, so I set the font to Courier New. And here's my first line of code. The first line of code is txt_list.text equals, and then I have product, my first column heading, .PadRight20. And what that does is that says I'm going to place this item, product, that string, and I'm going to pad that string to a length of 20 with spaces. And so I get a column of 20. It's adding these spaces in. Then it's going to concatenate to that QNTY for quantity as a literal string, and I'm going to pad that to the right by 1. So I get one space. I pad to the right for the value of 5, giving me 1 space. Then I do a pad left for price. So here it's putting the characters in front, but the column is 8 characters. So I end up with 3 spaces in front of the word price, which is 5 characters, and concatenate to that the word total, this one to 9 characters, so it puts 4 spaces in front of the word total. My next line, I'm doing the same thing, except I'm adding a carriage return new line to the text box, brings it down this next line, and then I'm adding 10 hyphens to kind of produce a little bit of an underline, and padding that for 20. 4 hyphens, padding that to 5. 6 hyphens, and padding that to the left for a value of 8. And then another 6 hyphens, padding it to the left of 9 characters. Then I create a variable called String.Product, assign it the value of Tide detergent, an integer variable of quantity 1, a double variable of price, $12.79, and then I calculate a double variable named item total as price times quantity. And then I'm simply creating my third line of the text box. So I'm concatenating to that plus equals a carriage return line feed, go down to the third line, the value of product, which is Tide detergent, padded to the right for 20 characters, the value of quantity, converting that to a string, since it's an integer, padding that to the right of 5, concatenate to that, the value of price, converted to a string of currency with 2 decimal places, padding it to the left, 8 spaces, and then finally item total, also converting it to string with 2 decimal places of currency, and padding it to the left of 9 spaces. Then I simply change the value of product, the value of quantity, price, and item total. And I use the exact same line again that I used up here. This time it's going to print out the Honeycrisp apple, quantity of 5, 58 cents, and $2.90 being my total, 5 times 58. So that's how PadLeft works and PadRight works. So let's look at another way to do this. I'm going to use something called String.Format. In using String.Format, I can set up the same columns, but just a different method of doing this. One method is not necessarily better than the other. It's kind of personal preference of which one you choose to use. But I start by beginning a string variable. I called mine FS for format string. It's a literal string comprised of, in this case, I want 4 columns. It's comprised of 4 pairs of numbers inside of curly brackets. So the first item in each pair is the column number. Remember, in programming, we often start counting with 0. So this column here is column 0, and I set it up of a minus 20 characters. Now it's actually 20 characters in width. The minus sign says to align it on the left. So it's going to the left and push right. Column 1 is a minus 5 characters. Column 2, which is my third column, is 8 characters. There's no minus here, so it's going to align things on the right. And then the fourth column, column number 3, is 9 characters, and again, lining it on the right. Then whenever I want to use that, such as in this first line where I want to put the names across the top, I can say txtlist.text equals string.format. That's our method. The first parameter in that method is fs. That's my formatting string. And I could have also taken this literal string and put it there instead of fs. But if you're going to use this a bunch of times, it's probably more valuable to create a string variable, or it's easier to do that, a little less typing. And then comma delimited each of the items that I want to display in these 4 columns. So a little string of product, comma, little string of quantity, comma, little string of price, comma, little string of total. Close out that method with the parentheses and my semicolon. Do the same thing on the next line. Here I'm concatenating to what's already there, so I use plus equals. I'm going to concatenate the carriage return line feed and then concatenate my string.format, again of being fs, and then the hyphens that I want to underline these. So 10 hyphens, 4 hyphens, 6 hyphens, 6 hyphens. Then as we did earlier, I'm going to create the items that I want the next lines of my columnar chart. String variable called product, give it the value of Tide detergent. Integer variable called quantity, value of 1. Price variable, which is a double, 12.79, and then another double variable item total equals price times quantity. And then once again, I use string.format to display the data, concatenating to what's already there, plus equals, concatenate the carriage return line feed, plus my string.format string, my fs, which is the string format that I want to use of the columns. I want to put in product. I want quantity converted to a string. I want price converted to a string with the value of currency of 2 decimals. And the same thing, item total converted to a string, currency value of 2 decimals. That gives me my line here of Tide detergent 1, $12.79 and $12.79. Then I simply change the product values, the quantity, the price, once again recalculate the item total. I use the exact same line as I did for the Tide detergent, but now the values of product, quantity, price, and item total have changed, and so it reflects that data when it creates the string going across that text box. Now again, the key here is to use a Courier new font or some monospace font where every character takes up the same amount of space. Let's take a look at this running with using this method in Visual Studio. I'm going to double click on the form load. So I've changed the form load method now to use the String.Format. So this was the code we just saw earlier. And then my btn add button basically did the same thing. I simply used the same string format, fs variable, and then use the same line we used up here where I'm concatenating carriage return line feed, and then the string format using fs showing product, quantity, price, and item total. Let's watch this run. And you can see I get a nice column format here. We'll add in watermelon. So we want 2 of those, and they are $4.99 a piece. Add to the list. And so I get a watermelon value of 2. $4.99 is my individual price. For the total is $9.98. And you see that things are lining up very nicely. So that's how we create columns in C# with a text box and using either String.PadLeft or PadRight or String.Format.